Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the GM, and in this one, we're talking about part two of the big invasion storyline. Which, if you haven't checked out part one first, make sure you go do that. I'll try to remember to drop a link below. Um, it was a pretty big deal, really, in my humble opinion, anyways. Uh, and I talked about that quite a bit, I guess, in the first video, so I won't talk about it again, but I'll just say this. I like it a lot, and I'm kind of bummed out in a way that it doesn't have the recognition that a lot of other stuff like um Secret Wars and Zero Hour and stuff like that seems to have. At any rate, before we get into the adventure itself, make sure you hit that like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people without telling them. And leave us a comment. Part of that is to help us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we just love hearing from you guys. We have a genuinely awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place in Cuba, where the alien invaders from the planet Durla are using shapeshifting. And like I said in the last video, if you want to imagine what that's like, think of John Carpenter's The Thing, right? They're really horrific when they're turning into these various things. And just like in that movie, they can look like specific people. So to take over the government there, they decide to assume the forms of government officials. And of course, the guys they are pretending to be aren't around anymore. So the current Flash, who is Donald Allen, he's the son of Barry Allen, who in turn was the Silver Age Flash. Don runs in there and he manages to defeat a bunch of these guys. And then afterwards, he's playing cleanup. And once the aliens in Cuba are defeated, the rest of them retreat, they take off. Meanwhile, in outer space, Superman talks the Daxamites into siding with him. And the Daxamites, for anyone who doesn't remember, it used to be a colony of Kryptonians who settled on this planet called Daxam. And it was so long ago, they don't even remember that they used to be Kryptonian, basically. But at any rate, so that's the connection there. And that's what Superman appeals to get him on his side. So he leads them to where several other heroes are, including Guy Gardner and the Martian Manhunter. And at any rate, when the Daxamites arrive on the scene, Guy Gardner, who is, of course, the resident loudmouth, he starts talking about how you can't trust these aliens. So Martian Manhunter reminds Guy, who sounds really xenophobic at the moment. Martian Manhunter says, "Well, I'm an alien, Guy." And Guy says, "So?" And the Daxamites tell the Martian Manhunter that he is the second non-human being that they have met, upon coming to Earth, who was willing to lay down his life to protect this planet and the people on it. So they say that the six of them can do no less. But Guy speaks up and says, "Hey, there's only five of you guys." So they explain that the sixth Daxamite stayed behind. And the Martian Manhunter is very quick to point out that there's something in Earth's atmosphere that is toxic to Daxamites. And and the Daxamites haven't really figured out what this is yet. It's still a mystery to them. And they explain that the sixth Daxamite knew this. He knew he would die, but he thought it was important to give his life kind of to atone for their part in this whole invasion. So with his dying breath, the sixth Daxamite sent an SOS signal to the planet Daxam. So almost immediately after we hear this, the Daxamites show up in their starships, and they have these kind of like blast door kind of things over the windows of the ships. So they lower those, letting the yellow sunlight through the windows, right? So these guys all start to power up. And their whole thing is um they stay in space. They don't actually land on Earth because whatever the problem is that hurts them, it's something in the air on Earth, some kind of little particle of something. So as long as they stay in the vacuum of space, they're actually fine. So then, using the same powers that pre-crisis Superman had, for that matter, the Daxamites begin to attack this armada of alien starships. And so this is the big turning point in the war. And there's this alien space station slash prison called the Starlog. And it's kind of a play on words like Stalog, if you've ever heard of that. And at any rate, so the son of the original Brainiac is here. He's actually the adopted son. The original Brainiac was kind of like a Terminator from a planet called Kolu, and he was supposed to seem like one of the Coluans. And so, to kind of keep up appearances, he had adopted a son. And that's who this guy is. His name is Vril Dox II. So, AKA Brainiac 2. So, Brainy sees this and decides that he should strike while the iron is hot. So, he leads a prison break. And one of the guys who is assisting him is a former Green Lantern named John Redbridge. And also in their party is John's wife, who is a attractive cat girl who's an alien. She's got white fur. Her name is Felicity. And she's one of the Omega Men. And then the other Omega Men are also here. So they're all um fighting the various prison guards and stuff like that. So they break free from the Starlog and join a ton of Earth's other superheroes, and they help the Daxamites, fight, with this massive battle where they're destroying starships and all that stuff. So seeing all of this, the Dominators broadcast a message saying that the charade is over and the time has finally arrived to abandon their allies. And it turns out that their real purpose for being here was not to wipe out the metahumans. It was actually to make an army of them. And as their name suggests, they wanted to dominate them. They wanted to gain mental control of this army of supers, right? So the leader of the Kuns, and the Kuns are the males all kind of look like the Hulk in a way. They all have, they actually in the comics have pretty much every color of skin you can think of, but most of the ones in these issues have pink skin, and then their hair is just some random, color of hair. Some have white hair, some have blonde hair, some have black hair, stuff like that. They have like a lot of handlebar mustaches and goatees and beards and stuff. At any rate, though, so the leader of the Kuns is furious because their mentality is almost kind of like the Klingons from Star Trek, where they're like very into they're heavily associated with battle, but then some of them can actually be very honorable too. And so the leader of the Kuns is like furious that his allies have turned on him. He's like, these guys have no honor. We have to take them out, blah, blah, blah. And just then, Deadman, aka Boston Brand, goes through the wall of this guy's ship because he's a literal ghost, and he's able to possess the body of the Kund commander and he has the commander get out his blaster pistol, and then he takes it and he puts it up against his head, and then he activates the thing. And when I read this comic book, by the way, I was shocked that they showed it. That wouldn't seem like as a big of a deal now, right? But in 1989, that was a heck of a thing. Um, and it's also one of these moments where, Boston Brand is just trying to take people out and help in any way that he can. But actually, in that moment, the Kuns might have been really useful to Earth's forces. At any rate, so Captain Atom, after that, then addresses the world because of what the Daxamites are doing, right? And Captain Atom says that the war is over and Earth has finally won. And damage reports slowly start coming in, and they find out that Moscow actually got hit the hardest. And it would seem that the USSR has fallen. So this isn't just the end of the alien war, it's actually also the end of the Cold War era as well. So that brings us to the main plot of today's adventure. The invasion mounted by the Alien Alliance has been defeated, the surrender negotiated and accepted, and the enemy has been sent packing back out into space. But in orbit of Earth, a lone, small Dominator ship ejects a brand new invention called a gene bomb, and it goes off. And the skies over Earth turn black as if light itself were somehow reversed. And heroes everywhere see this weird phenomenon and wonder what's going on. And around the world, in the moments that follow, people's powers start to go crazy. They seem magnified. In the USSR, Firestorm releases a ton of fire. In the United States, the Flash vibrates out of control and it actually causes an earthquake. Elsewhere, Ralph Dibny, aka the Elongated Man, can't control his powers, and his rubbery limbs just keep growing and growing until eventually he just looks like like a pile of like rubbery tubes. And Amanda Waller and Maxwell Lord work together, and the superpowered heroes and villains are transported to this new facility that is massive, and it's called the Metaplex, where they are sedated in hospital beds, and doctors and scientists begin looking for a cure. And while all of this is happening, the world is seen as defenseless. So the non powered villains of the world rise up, and chaos takes over, and there's mass looting and stuff like that. And so the nations of the world struggle not just with the aftermath of what is the biggest, most destructive alien invasion that the world has ever seen, but also the sudden loss of its protectors, who they've grown to be really, really reliant on, right? And then in the Metaplex, the first superpowered being actually dies, and his name was Scott Fisher. In space, the Dominators hold a meeting to discuss the gene bomb and how it failed to do what they wanted it to do. Earth's metahumans have been rendered useless to the Dominators, so they discuss what kind of punishment they should give its inventor, right? So they imprison him on the Dominator homeworld. Elsewhere, the Omega Men have on their ship with them the human beings that the Dominators had abducted at the very beginning of this whole story, and they had killed a bunch of people, and then a handful, like a half a dozen people, had survived that whole process, and now they had superpowers. So, for instance, Snapper Carr now had the ability to literally snap his fingers, and he had teleportation now. So the Omega Men are taking them back to Earth when they run into Superman and a couple of Green Lanterns in space over Earth. And so John Redbridge is happy to see the Lanterns because he has been a prisoner on the Starlog for like a while now, right? And his ring hasn't had a charge, and he got separated from the lantern he uses to charge it. So he bums a charge off of Guy Gardner's power battery. And so for the first time in, over a year, he's got his powers again. So the heroes have kind of this meeting of the minds, and they come up with a plan. So using the Omega Men's ship, then they travel to the Dominator homeworld, where Snapper Carr uses that teleportation of his to send the Martian Manhunter down to the surface, and Jean uses his shapeshifting to disguise himself as a Dominator. And so he infiltrates the facility and finds where the Dominator is that's being held prisoner, who's the guy who invented the gene bomb, and he had figured out how the human metagene worked and all that stuff. So Jean reads that guy's mind and figures out not only, like, here's how the metagene works, here's like how you trigger it, and so on and so forth. Here's the reverse of all that, right? And here's how we would make an antidote. But in order for the Martian Manhunter to make the antidote, he needs access to specialized equipment. And so for that, they need to take the Omega Man's ship, Omega Men plural, sorry, my bad. They need to take the ship of the Omega Men back to the Starlog again, where they escaped from, because that's where there's a Dominator lab that's going to have the equipment they need. So they head back there. They fight their way in. And unfortunately, I have no idea when anybody rolled because, like I said, we played this back in 1989, so it's been just way too long. But they fight their way in through this endless horde of alien guards, and Martian Manhunter makes the antidote, right? While everybody else was a player character who's fighting alien bad guys. And so eventually the heroes run out of bad guys, right? Everybody's knocked out. Martian Manhunter finishes what he was doing, and then they take the ship of the Omega Men back to Earth. And the thing that they made, honestly, it looks like those plasma balls like they used to sell in like Spencer gifts. You know what I mean? It looks almost like a crystal ball with like lightning bolts in it, like kind of pink colored lightning stuff. You touch it with your fingers and it comes over and it, touches your finger, that kind of thing. I love those things, by the way. At any rate, that's kind of what this looks like they have. And so they find the gene bomb, and it's still in orbit. It's in a slowly decaying orbit over the Earth. So they take out this component that was in there. They plug their giant lightning light thing into it, and then they turn it on. And so once it is activated, it creates a blinding golden light. And so not only are the various characters who were dying from the gene bomb, not only are they no longer dying and they start to recover and get hit points back and so on and so forth, but this golden light also creates a bunch of brand new heroes and villains. And so that brings us to the epilogue. A new era began in our role-playing game, in our game world, because of this adventure. And I think I mentioned this in the last video. Greg Sheets had been the GM. This was kind of his last game he was running for a while. He had gotten tired of running DC Heroes, and he wanted to switch over to running a Star Wars campaign, which, by the way, he's still running to this day. So he passed the torch, not to me, but to Jay Mora. It wasn't until Jay uh, joined the Army out of high school that I took over several years after this. So the whole time I was in high school, Jay Mora was the game master, and this was the first thing he had done, and then he brought the game to a whole new group of players. So like Amanda Ike got weather control from this adventure, from that golden light in the sky, the reversed gene bomb, whatever you want to call it. And she started going by the name Wiccan. Brandon Briggs developed fire powers and went by the name Flame Boy. Casey Reber got Omni power and called herself Quixotica. Chris Cross also got Omni power, and he went by a lot of different monikers over the years. One of them was Flux. David Eckelberger got life form control powers from the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. So some of those powers include things like biophysical control, biovampirism, body transformation, others, grafting, neural manipulation, plague carrier, and shape change others. And he went by the moniker of Bioman. David Phelps got interface, and he became known as Zog. Eric Grosscup got a version of the personality transfer power and became the Ghost in the Machine. Fran Hall got super strength and called herself Princess. Henning Meister got Spider-Man style abilities, and he, interestingly enough, later went on to go by the name Necron. Jenny Parker got weather control. She called herself Breeze. John Boggs got higher attributes, and he eventually went by the name Super Soldier. His brother Josh Boggs got super speed. He became Turbo. Maya Cook got Omni power. She became Omni Girl. The list goes on and on. And throughout the 1990s, there was an explosion of new heroes and villains. And very often it was the case that they could not think of an origin. And so we would always go, well, there was the invasion story with the gene bomb thing. And a lot of them were like, cool, done. So this was kind of the catalyst for a whole new chapter of the game. But that, of course, as always, is a story for another day. So needless to say, we really enjoyed the big invasion of 1989. And it wasn't just one game session, it was many spread out over a really long period of time with at least 3 different game masters all kind of overseeing different aspects of the story. And it's one of those things where we just kept coming back to the well on this one because we really enjoyed it first time around, and then years later we were really nostalgic for it. And as always, we hope that you enjoyed hearing about it too. If so, as always, we would love it if you took a moment of your time to smash that like button, check to see if you're still subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.